How'd you feel about this 3.5 hour?
I gotta pee. No. This was a great movie. It really was.
Dude.
Well acted, well directed.
You know what? We sat there and we watched it last night, and we started it at like 4 p.m. and we finished it at like 8:15, 8, and you know, like we stopped it at. And for me, the movie actually flew by until I would say like the last 30 or so minutes. Like if it was 3 hours, to me it didn't feel 3 hours at all. Like I was truly into this like kind of epic story of the bodyguard of Jimmy Hoffa. You know, like, and
it felt like 3.5
oh,
hours.
I know. You leaned to me like because we stopped at like an hour in.
And by no means does it feel like it's dragging. You don't feel like it's dragging.
No,
and you're not like
you're never bored.
Yeah, but when you look down at the clock and you pause it and you're like, I gotta feed my dog and everything, and I look down and I'm like, we've been watching this for an hour and a half and we got 2 hours left.
But I didn't mind it because I felt like there was so much that they had to tell, and I'm first of all, I am glad that they decided to make it. If they were going to make it this long, I'm glad they did it on Netflix.
Yeah.
And I saw there's on Netflix there's like a 30-minute interview between Pacino, Pesci, De Niro, and Scorsese, and Scorsese kind of mentions that he was like. He felt like this was a good movie to make for Netflix, you know, and I actually agree. While I do wish I could see this in theaters, I felt like it was perfectly fine for Netflix.
Yeah. I had one complaint about this.
What is your?
And it was at the time. My one complaint. The de-aging technology, while the faces looked good.
Oh, I completely agree.
De Niro's like walking around and his movements are like a 70-year-old man, but his face is young.
In that interview, they discussed that. And they discussed how they would try and do numerous takes. You're like, you're looking 65 there. You got to try and look 49.
Yeah.
And it's like, first, the acting is fantastic.
Yeah.
I think...
But I understand why they did de-aging because of the fact they're probably young for the shortest part of the movie.
Yeah.
Most of it is probably, I would guess, around they're in their late 40s and up for the vast majority of the movie.
Yeah,
and at that point, it's fine. They play it all well.
For me, there was one scene in particular where I was like, I really wish they had honestly just used the body double as well.
Yeah.
Which was when De Niro comes home, he finds out his daughter was pushed by a grocer.
Yeah.
And he takes he takes his daughter to the grocer, and he's like, you know, typical De Niro.
It's supposed to be kind of like in Goodfellas, where he finds out that his girlfriend, the guy hit her.
Had like been hitting on her and made her feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be like that, but the way he started beating up the grocer, and it didn't look as believable because it looked like 70-year-old Robert De Niro like trying to punch him and hit him.
Yeah.
And it wasn't as convincing, and that for me was the only time I was like, man, the body language is clearly this is an older guy. But that being said, I actually thought the de-aging technology of the face was, for the most part, pretty seamless. Like, they thought they did a pretty good job. Obviously, when De Niro is supposed to be really young, you can kind of notice it.
When Pesci is calling him kid, and you're going,
that's not a kid.
Yeah.
No, that's not a kid at all. And... but once he becomes kind of
after like the first hour and 15,
seriously,
20 minutes.
I would say it's after the first 45 minutes, man.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No, it's long.
But then maybe if that's true, to me that's a testament of how good.
That's not even half the movie.
It's like a testament of how much that movie flies by. Because for me, that was like 30 minutes, you know.
Anyway, that's my one complaint about this movie. The rest of it, it's
awesome.
I mean, it's right up there with Scorsese's best.
It's up there with, first of all, in the first 20 minutes,
Of course, every time I think of a Scorsese movie, I'm like, no, that's his best one.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's so many. No, that's his best one.
In the first 20 minutes, I learned, leaned to you, I was like, Scorsese does this mobster gangster shit so perfectly. Mm-hmm. And this movie's no different. This is like, in my opinion, this was his like mature take on the gangster movie. Yeah. And on top of that, I think it's kind of his farewell to the gangster movie. Yeah. Because it is dealing with, especially towards the end, it's them being older. And while I did say it started to feel really kind of long,
it's weird to say, but it's like, it's a more grounded gangster.
Well, see, that's when I think of Goodfellas. Obviously, it's awesome, but you do think of towards the end where he's
like coked out.
He's coked out of his mind. Everything's psychotic, and it's like extreme paranoia. And in this, it's like that's a perfect way to put it. It's very grounded. It's very realistic, which is kind of interesting because this is based on a book that some people don't take to be true. Some people this was just this guy that
wanted to take credit for this.
Yeah, but the way it's made, everything kind of adds up. Where you're like, this probably is what happened. Mm-hmm. Like it makes sense.
Yeah. If it's not what happened,
it's probably
some hell of
similar.
A story.
Oh, I was about to say, like it's an awesome story, and I loved. Okay. Pacino's great as Jimmy Hoffa. He does kind of, it's typical high energy Pacino, like because it's funny because back in the day Pacino used to be kind of reserved, like when in Godfather 2, but then it was
when he's playing Michael,
it was basically post Scarface.
He just
where he's like oh yeah, and he's been that way ever since, and in this he's no different. And he's awesome as Jimmy Hoffa. Like at first, and he does a great job because at first you kind of like him because he is eccentric, and you could understand why people, they say in the 50s he was as big as Elvis, and in the 60s he was like the Beatles. Mm-hmm. He was so well known, and that's kind of like what the whole point of the movie is about. How big he was, and at the end, when De Niro's in that nursing home, he's like, you don't know who that is? He's pointing to Jimmy Hoffa, and the girl's like, oh, yeah, that's Jimmy Hoffa. And it's that realization that he comes to, which is like, oh, he isn't as big as, he was. And, but Pacino, back to the point, he's great. I mean, he's really good, especially towards the end of the movie where you start to realize, like, he's causing a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. And he's great. But that being said, I told you before we filmed this, I thought the standout performance for me was Joe Pesci. Yeah. And the reason I say that is
it's such a different character than
Pesci.
For Pesci,
he is very reserved. He's quiet. He's not. When I think of Joe Pesci, I think of Goodfellas, Home Alone, and My Cousin Vinny, where he's very energetic. He's cussing all the time. He's Joe Pesci. Yeah. And in this, he acts like how you would think a mob boss would, where he is like he's in control of everything, and he's quiet. He's reserved. He was just awesome. And the reason I thought it was more of a standout, it was because it made me realize like Joe Pesci's just a phenomenal actor.
Oh, he's great. He is really good in this, and he is, in my opinion, I'm in the same boat. He's standout. That being said, there are also a lot of smaller performances in this that you watch and you're like, oh, they were really good.
Yeah.
Like, Harvey Keitel's one.
Well, Harvey Keitel, it was...
I mean, and it's not that he's not doing anything that Harvey Keitel normally does do.
It's perfectly in his lane.
Yeah, and it was like, his presence on screen is great.
And it sucks because he's in it for a 3.5 hour movie. He's truly in it maybe 5 minutes. Yeah. But it sucks because I was like, I wanted more. Yeah. Because he can play that type of character. It's very, to give you an idea, it's kind of similar to his character. He's like the wolf in Pulp Fiction. Like he's like, I'm top dog. I'm handling shit. Like don't worry about it. Yeah. And that's kind of the vibe he gives. And he's like, that's his lane for me is that, and he's perfect at it. Yeah.
I know, like, he knows more than you.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of, that scene and the scene when they're in, not with Keitel, but it's when they're in Miami. Those were the two of my favorite scenes, which was De Niro was about to blow up that place and Keitel was telling him, like, like I have stake in that place. You're not blowing that place up. And but speaking of other smaller performances, I thought Stephen Graham as Tony Pro was great as well.
He is very good.
He's really good.
Yeah.
And
that scene in Miami when him and
because Hoffa and Tony Pro do not get along.
No.
And that scene was awesome because you have because it was Tony Jack who, from my understanding, was like
De Niro
and Tony Jack
are like, come on, guys.
Well, it's funny because what you realize is throughout the movie, Chiron pops up where it says like who the person is, and usually right after who it says they are, it says when they were killed
and how they were killed,
or what ended up happening to them. And Tony Jack, it says Tony Jack, well liked by all, died of natural causes in 2000 or whatever. And as the movie goes on, you realize De Niro's probably very similar to that Tony Jack character.
Yeah, everybody seems to get along with De Niro.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's because of who De Niro is, because as the movie goes on, you're watching it and you're going like, oh, he is really a badass.
No, he is.
As it goes on.
Sorry. Actually, favorite scene is where he kills
that was
Sebastian Maniscalco.
Well, that was just cool how it was filmed, too.
Well, and it was the narration. First of all, in all these gangster movies that Scorsese does, the narration, I love that he uses narration. And in that where he's sitting there having to decide what type of gun, should I use one or two guns? Oh, well, he has a bodyguard, you need to have two guns.
Yeah.
You know, like that whole thing. And then to show how it's filmed and him getting it set up and then killing that guy, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Right after it ended, I turned to you and was like, that was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I agree. That what you were talking about is, I think people like De Niro because he does what he's told, he doesn't cause problems, and he's a pretty likable guy.
Yeah.
And you're right, and in a sense, it might be because it's like, well, you don't want to fuck with him because he will kill you.
Yeah.
I mean, he can. And, yeah, like, I think when you look at these characters, when you think of hitmen, people that are like killers, you almost always want to think of them as like psychotic. And De Niro is just reserved.
To me, that's why I just really enjoyed this movie, because it was like
it was business.
Yeah,
that was
there was no personal, and like that was part of the end. They're like, do you regret it? And he's like, no,
like it was just
like that was
my
like,
job.
It was it
was a job.
It was a job to him. It was,
and speaking of,
and
it's not. It is a spoiler in the sense of the movie, but it's not because you know what happens to Jimmy Hoffa. I loved how they handled that the scene where he inevitably has to kill Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah.
And because usually in a movie like this, it's Jimmy Hoffa would realize what was going on and he'd start pleading and saying like, no, I have a family, I'll stop whatever I'm doing, we can quit.
Hoffa goes into an empty house.
He realizes that he's probably set up. He turns around and he turns to De Niro because he thinks De Niro's on his side. He goes, come on, let's go. And De Niro just shoots him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quick, it just happens, and it's like, that's how it would happen.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be so dramatic and overly over the top.
I thought that was good too, because I thought the movie did a good job, because it wasn't like De Niro really liked Hoffa.
He liked Hoffa, he liked his family too.
Yeah.
And that scene where
he's got to call his wife.
That was to me the best piece of acting in the movie. When De Niro's having to call his wife and he keeps, not De Niro's wife, called Jimmy Hoffa's wife, and he keeps stammering over his words like, I don't think he can't be dead, and it's like De Niro knows what happened to him, and that's what was sad, and that was my favorite line in the movie, which is where Pesci basically had to sit him down and like, no, this is gonna have to happen.
Yeah.
And then the line is, it is what it is.
It is what it is. As soon as Pesci says that,
De Niro is
like, yeah.
And because the sad thing is, De Niro, as much as he doesn't want to, he knows that he's right. Because Hoffa's just causing more and more problems.
Who's great? It's the guy that plays Tony. The other Tony.
Wait. Okay.
Remember, there's multiple Tonys, and Hoffa keeps going, wait, which Tony? What Tony? And it's the younger guy that's playing...
Yes.
What's his name? What's that actor's name?
I don't know. Are you talking about the one that
he's the heavier set? He's playing the heavier set guy.
Oh, yes, he plays Herc in The Wire. You haven't watched The Wire.
He's also in Entourage.
I can't. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like Dominic. I think Dominic We'll put up the name right here. He was awesome. He was in tons of makeup, and if you told me first, you were like, "Oh, I think that's Michael Chiklis." I was like, "That is not Michael Chiklis."
Yeah.
And I looked it up. I was like, "No, that's Herc." And you're right. Yeah, I thought he was awesome.
We both turned to each other and were like, "He is killing."
Well, in particular, it was the scene where they're having like the dinner for Robert De Niro or for Frank, and Frank has asked Jimmy Hoffa to speak, and Jimmy Hoffa, and that it's just how it's filmed. Everything's awesome. It's just the choices involved. Jimmy Hoffa knows that Tony doesn't like him, and that Joe Pesci's starting maybe and Jimmy is eating that steak and is staring down Tony.
Yeah.
Remember, he's just chomping on steak, staring him down, and that's when Tony starts talking to Pesci, and it's like he's telling him how like Hoffa's gonna fuck up everything because there's the whole thing how he's holding back on pensions and stuff. And it was because it was so believable. Like, he's in tons of makeup, and you just start to buy like he's Tony, and you're at I agree. Him, Stephen Graham, Keitel was great, and it's what's so good about these Scorsese movies is obviously he gets great leads. But he always gets
like small parts
that are just perfect.
Anna Paquin was good, and she doesn't say anything.
She says she has like 2 lines, and I've read where that's.
But it's all facial expression, and it's all like.
I've read where there's a little, I wouldn't say controversy, but there's some complaints that it's like you get Anna Paquin, who's a pretty established actress, and you have her in the movie, in the movie pretty prominently. Throughout.
She's in it, you see her, but that's the point.
Is that she speaks like twice, and the one time she speaks is after.
Why?
It's because
she
knows what's going on, and she really likes Jimmy.
Yeah.
And what you're getting to is right. Is that like that was kind of the whole point of the movie, because even when it was young Anna Paquin, she didn't speak a lot. And she was more of she knew what was happening. She would
and the trigger to all of it was beating up the store clerk. He dragged her down the street to watch him kick the shit
out of this guy,
out of the grocer.
And she, at a very young age, realized what kind of business her dad was in.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that was a pretty good choice of having her be quiet, because she knew not only because obviously they're watching TV, it's like Jimmy Hoffa's been missing for 4 days, and Frank is like, I'm going to go call Joe, who is Jimmy Hoffa's wife, and she goes, "You haven't called Joe?" And he's like, No, I haven't. And she goes, and Anna Paquin, this is the first time she speaks. She goes, "Why?"
Yeah.
And Frank is like, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Why haven't you called Joe?" And it's because at that moment she knows.
Well, no, she knew before. She knew at the party. When she's watching them all talk and she sees De Niro,
yeah, but at that point it was
when she saw Hoffa with Pesci and saw because they got into it.
Yeah,
and she was never a fan of Pesci, even though Pesci would have done anything for that girl.
That was what was sad. Pesci he would give her ice skates. He at no point would do anything to hurt her, and if anything, he would protect her from everything. It's just that Hoffa was very charismatic.
Yeah. And
that's why she, as a little girl, kind of took to Jimmy Hoffa liked his ice cream, and he would get ice cream for her and share it with her. But Pesci, it's the whole mob mentality. It's family.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a good point. She knew something was up.
Well, she saw that spat, and then she saw Pesci talking to her dad, and she knew what her dad did.
Still, that's besides the point. Point is, I thought it was a perfectly fine choice.
Yeah.
For her to be kind of quiet, to not have a whole lot of lines.
I liked it,
and it's especially because it's how the movie ends, which is he never was able to reconnect with her.
No.
Everyone else he was able to kind of visit and talk to, but he could never reconnect with Peggy, and I thought that was
even though he couldn't,
perfectly well
he never
done.
Really reconnected with any of his daughters.
He was able to.
I
don't know. There was the one daughter that they seemed like, every once in a while they would talk or get together.
Yeah. But
still, I really like this movie. It's not. I think I'm gonna have to go. It's like A-. I mean, it's because on one level there are times you're like, this is borderline perfect. Like this movie's awesome, but the length it does get to you. But then you're like, that length I thought was needed for what we're trying to tell.
It's a big. That's my point. Is it never drags? It's just a big story.
Yeah. And one last thing I will say about the story. In mobster movies, they get to a certain age and they say like, he went to jail in 1984 and then he died and whatever. It shows everything. And it's something you don't see in mobster movies, and I loved it. I loved
that. They got old.
It shows how they get old, and it shows how they had to live with themselves and what had to deal with what they did.
Yeah.
And I personally, even though that was when it started to feel long, the movie, I love that they did that.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of made it feel kind of, new. Yeah. You know what? Yeah,
it's an A for me.
Yeah, I'm going to have to give this an A. It's Scorsese, like...
It's one of, if not the best movie we've seen this year.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm gonna obviously have to think about it, and I'm not gonna say it's the best, but it's one of. It'll get nominated.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
That being said, even for its length, today I was at work and I was like, I want to watch this again.
Oh, you could.
Yeah.
It's like, again, it's not a hard watch. It's just long
at all, and even for mobster.
I think if we'd have turned it on at 1:00, it just so happened that we turned it on later, and it went past dinner. It went from 4 to almost 8.
You felt that length.
Yeah. I think if we'd have watched it midday, you wouldn't even thought about it.
Yeah.
Or if we'd have gone to the theater, you wouldn't even thought about it.
I just thought it was right. It's right up Scorsese's alley. Nobody puts in a bad performance. The writing's really good because there's some very tension-filled scenes, and there's some comedy kind of throughout, which is it's really well played. And I also... if there is a minor complaint, it's in the sense that at times I could see, I wasn't, but I could see where some people could get a little confused because there's it's he's narrating, but then it keeps flashing back to him in the funeral home, anecdotally telling stories, and then it jumps to him doing the road trip with Pesci, but that trip is leading up to them meeting with Hoffa, and then it's there's flashbacks, but there's also flashbacks within flashbacks.
Yeah.
So I could see where some people would be like, "Wait a minute, what time? Where are we?"
Yeah.
But they do a good enough job that it's not totally confusing.
Yeah.
For me personally, so I did. I really like this movie. Really it was something I was really anticipating. I've been anticipating this for 2 years because it's. They had to go through the whole de-aging process, and the budget kept getting worse. And I was wondering, I wonder if this will end up not being as good. But then I had to keep reminding myself, it's Scorsese. I don't see it being bad. And I think it paid off. I'm good. Yeah. So
it's good. It's on Netflix.
Obviously, watch it. And honestly, it's a movie. I don't recommend it, but it is a movie that you can split up and watch because I think there are several different points where you could probably stop it.
This movie you could almost break it up into chapters.
Yeah, it honestly could have been
like a small miniseries.
Yeah, they could have made it into a miniseries, but I think it flowed just as well like this. So, but that was our take on The Irishman, and we'll catch you next time with our take. So.